Horace Randall Williams.
Among the members of this distinguished class today sits a graduate I am sure thought that this day might never come. Might never come.
The conflict erupted in 1972 over rumors the administration planned to develop an 85-acre lake bed across from campus. The lake bed had been deeded to the school for $5 in the late 40s, when its Homewood campus was being planned. Since 1913, the property had morphed from a man-made lake with an exclusive country club to a swamp to a dry lake bed. Initially, the lake bed held little commercial value for the school. By the 60s, however, it was a forested wilderness primed for suburban development. By the early 70s, it was worth millions, and that's what it would take for the trustees and President Leslie Wright to build the new campus.
The major responsibility that Dr. Wright had and was given when he was selected president was build the campus. They didn't give him the money to build the campus with. That was his responsibility. So he had to go out and raise the funds.
But Wright was running a financially strapped private college that in 1965 had become a university struggling to compete as one.
It was the introduction in the mid-1960s of a junior college system that had a tremendous impact on all of the private schools of Alabama, simply because tuition at the junior colleges was virtually non-existent.
At the same time, the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa was spawning an extension center that became the University of Alabama, Birmingham.
Samford's enrollment during all these years of the 1960s continued to plummet downhill.
Matters worsened when Samford refused to comply with the 1964 Civil Rights Act and was denied federal funding for programs, buildings, and student aid.
The triggering mechanism, I think, on this specific event was that we had applied for a National Science Foundation grant and been told we could not get it unless we signed the compliance agreement.
In 1968, the trustees decided the school's future hinged on signing the agreement and directed Wright to do so. Samford's future also lay in developing the lake bed. However, local residents wanted the property to remain forever wild and sued over the deed's covenants. After years of litigation, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled in Samford's favor in the summer of 1972. By mid-fall, Crimson editor Randall Williams and his student newspaper staff had prepared an article highlighting Samford's lake bed plans. The paper's advisor, journalism professor Richmond Brown, read the story and braced for Wright's reaction. For years, Brown had been caught in the middle of a contentious relationship between the president and the paper over censorship that stretched back to the 60s. A classic example involved home football games and individuals dressed in surplus band uniforms who fired a cannon when Samford scored. The cannon misfired one Saturday, hospitalizing a crew member with severe burns. The The incident made the local news, but Wright refused to allow Crimson editor David Gooch to mention it. He ran the story anyway in the next issue. President Wright ordered Satterfield to pull a story about a Catholic priest from UAB who held weekly forums with Samford students. He insisted on a substitute story and told her to run white space if she didn't have one. She didn't have one. Instead, Satterfield redacted the story. She and her staff rose early the next morning to distribute the paper. Then she drove home for the weekend. The campus was abuzz with rumors of expulsion. Wright was furious and demanded a meeting, so Satterfield returned to campus with her parents, who exacted a written promise from Wright that she would not be expelled, but only if she ran an editorial explaining the incident. She did, but the censorship continued. For Cartwright, there was always a sense of mutual distrust between the administration and the paper, because Wright was unyielding when it came to freedom of expression.
The president had made it very clear that he wanted no demonstrations on campus, and I'm certain that anybody that had participated in any of them would have soon been escorted out very unceremoniously.
So the paper printed stories about the cafeteria, parking, SGA elections, and counseling services. It rarely challenged the university line. That was about to change.
Early on, we began to have little small issues. Mr. Brown would question certain stories. Maybe they were about the food in the lunchroom, or parking, or registering. Who knows what they were.
Then the paper upset the administration by editorializing about student insurance, press freedom, and the campus postal service.
Maybe naively, it took us a little while to realize that he was not necessarily questioning all these stories on his own, that he was having to report to someone else in terms of the content of the newspaper, and that what we in fact viewed as an independent student enterprise was closely monitored and watched by the administration.
That was early in the semester. The controversy over the lakebed story lay dead ahead. Once Professor Brown read the story, he called Wright, per the president's instructions, to forewarn him. Then he went looking for Williams.
Randall,
Dr. Brown, hi.
do you mind if I sit down?
Go ahead.
So, I read President Wright your story about the lake bed development.
And?
He's not going to publish it.
What?
I was barely a paragraph into it, and he said there were factual errors all over it.
That's ridiculous.
He wants to do a press release instead. He says it'll be more accurate.
Accurate? We had sources. We had interviews, statistics, legal documents, built all the research necessary for an accurate article. This is censorship.
Calm down.
No, this is important. You taught me about First Amendment rights. If they're not going to let me edit the Crimson, then they might as well just give me a mop and let me clean up.
I did not teach them to defy anybody. I taught them responsibility. They knew that truth had to be not partial truth. It had to be, they were responsible for absolute truth, and they were responsible for the integrity of journalists. The president was blaming me, the students were blaming me. I told the students, when I talk to you, I sound like the president. When I'm talking to the president, I sound like you.
Brown was disillusioned. Prior to Samford, he edited Baptist publications and freelanced for Christian magazines, But he was working on his doctorate and interested in teaching when Samford beckoned.
I thought this would be the place to come to develop a program for training Christian writers.
After all, wealthy cotton planters had founded the school on Christian principles in Marion, Alabama in 1841.
The purpose that the planters had in starting this school was not only to educate their own children, but also to educate them in a Christian environment. So one of the founding principles, of course, which has remained one of the basic principles of the school to the present, is its Christian foundation.
Howard flourished until the Civil War destroyed the area's economy. In the late 19th century, railroads bypassed Marion, and it soon fell on hard times.
So the trustees of the school decided we ought to move to the thriving, burgeoning area of Birmingham, industrial capital of the state. And so in 1887, the campus, lock, stock, and barrel, was picked up and moved to East Lake.
The school had outgrown its East Lake campus by the late 40s and was landlocked. The neighborhood had declined, much like Marion in its time.
So the school, under the leadership of Major Harwell G. Davis, who had become president in 1939, began looking around for a new location for the school. The university moved to the new campus in the fall of 1957 with only 3 or 4 buildings on campus.
President Davis, who had the vision to relocate the campus, retired 1 year after the move to Homewood. So then the trustees called on President Wright to build it. His task was to balance conservative trustees and donors who wanted to take the school in one direction in the turbulent 60s, with students and faculty who pulled it in another. Wright could do that by controlling the message.
We had several direct conversations with university officials during this time period. But the upshot of it was that we were not going to run that story in the Samford Crimson. That is when we learned that the university viewed the student newspaper as a house organ of the university.
Wright's message was clear. So too was the path forward for Williams and most of his staff. They resigned en masse.
And in Homewood, the editor of the Samford Student newspaper...
The next day, the resignations were in both Birmingham newspapers and on local TV and radio newscasts. Wire Services picked up the story. It saw print in Montgomery, Mobile, Huntsville, and Anniston. The family feud over press freedom and the students' right to know was now the center of a public controversy.
Resigning over claims of censorship.
Controversy was the last thing on Williams's mind when he was college shopping as a 19-year-old. He was not only attracted to a school with a Christian mission, given his Baptist upbringing, but he didn't want to get far from his rural background.
I was from Chambers County, and a fellow had left a sizable scholarship for young men of good character from Chambers County, Alabama, to come here. So for all those reasons, when it came time to come, I decided I'd come to Samford.
He enrolled in the fall of 1970, more interested in law than journalism. All that changed one day quite by accident.
I was exiting out of the Student Union building, made almost a wrong turn in the Student Union building, and wandered into this room where there were all these maniacal people in there, engaged in frantic activity.
Hey, quick. You need to rewrite this quickly.
He eventually joined the staff, took on new responsibilities, and became editor his junior year. Along the way, he studied journalism under Professor Brown.
Brown was our professor teaching us about journalism principle and practice and theory, and then he was our advisor as we, as student journalists, sought to implement, these lessons and to be what amounted to, in our view, a community newspaper for the Samford student body and faculty.
But Williams's view of a student newspaper was at odds with the administration, so he and his staff pooled their limited finances to launch their own paper.
We would then start an independent student newspaper that was financed entirely by student contributions, other contributions, and advertising. It would not be it would not have any official connection to the university, and we believed naively that would solve all the problems.
But Williams couldn't find a publisher who would take him on, except for one, Jesse Lewis Sr.
When we were looking for a way to publish, to print this newspaper, we went to a couple of places, and a couple of places wanted nothing to do with us, or we couldn't afford them. And then we went to Lewis.
Mr. Lewis? Randall Williams. Randall? Just an interview.
So let me get this straight. You want to quit your school newspaper because the university is trying to censor you. You want to find a place to mark up your paper and paste it up and get it printed and everything, right?
Yes, sir. That's the plan.
Mm-hmm. But what are you going to do with this paper?
The plan is to take this paper of ours and write it and publish it and edit it completely independent of Samford and Samford censorship, and then distribute it on campus, give the students another voice to listen to. That's what we'll call it, another voice.
You know what? Absolutely. You can print that paper right here. You can mark it up here. You can paste it up here. Whatever you need to do, you can do it right here. How much can you pay, by the way?
We can't afford very much. We'll see what we can do.
Well, it doesn't matter. I admire you. I admire what you kids are doing, and we want to work with you. And anyway, Samford's gotten away for a little bit too long with all of their fights against integration, and I know we've come a long way, and things have gotten better, but they can always get a little bit better. So, son, congratulations.
Thank
got
you,
a
sir.
part.
Thank you.
All right.
Though integrated, Samford enrolled only 17 black undergraduates in 1973, many of them student athletes. It did not have a black faculty member, administrator, or trustee, but times were changing. Federal funds were flowing again, and enrollments were climbing with the addition of several innovative programs. The newspaper, Another Voice, also made its way to campus. Williams and 13 staffers published an 8-page alternative to the Crimson at the offices of the Birmingham Times. The first issue featured the lakebed controversy. This off-campus paper carried advertising and sold subscriptions, but being independently financed, it relied heavily on contributions from individuals, many of them faculty.
I would be on my way to classes in various buildings, and I would pass professors in the hallway and would have $20 bills slipped into my coat pocket or into my hand discreetly. Faculty members who were not seeking a confrontation with the administration and were not necessarily wanting to be vocal or public about this, but who clearly indicated to us that they thought we had a point and that they thought we had a right to do what we were doing.
Introduction, particularly good.
Thank you, sir.
But pay attention to the last page.
The administration's response to the paper and its campus distribution was swift. It directed campus police to confiscate the bi-weekly paper, and it told photographic services not to provide images. Meanwhile, the Student Senate condemned the administration's actions by passing a resolution in support of free speech. The Student Bar Association followed with a similar resolution. The Alabama Baptist weighed in with a page 1 story saying much of the response to the controversy favored the students. It didn't take long before the administration had enough. It ordered the staff to cease publishing or face strict disciplinary action for violating the student handbook.
The controversy at this point had moved from being a controversy about the lake bed to being a controversy about the students and the newspaper.
Wright summoned Williams and his staff to a meeting with top-level administrators and the university attorney. The students, fearing expulsion, brought their own attorney, who represented them on behalf of the American Civil Liberties Union. Pugh's mere presence was a game-changer. He argued that Williams and his staff were not attacking Samford or being offensive. They simply wanted the truth. He suggested disciplinary action would ignite a firestorm of publicity. Wright backed down, but the students were wary.
At that point, a good number of the students who were working with us, either out of concern for themselves, their graduation, parental pressure, community pressure, they felt that they had no choice but to take their names off of the newspaper.
Williams and a handful of others pressed on. They were encouraged by support they were getting from off-campus. State and regional professional journalists condemned the administration for setting a poor educational example for student journalists. Deans of journalism programs and student journalists at other universities also rallied in support of another voice. But President Wright was resolute. He wrote letters to the media and trustees saying the controversy wasn't about the First Amendment, but about who runs the university. The spring of 1973 ended in an uneasy truce between the students and the administration. This was not the case for the journalism department or Professor Brown. Rumors circulated he was being terminated, and journalism was being abolished. This led to a meeting between Brown and Samford's chief academic officer, Rurik Wheeler. The meeting was tape-recorded by mutual consent.
I think what was said last week in the president's office was that your contract would not be renewed, that budgets are going to be probably reduced, and that you should probably start looking for something else.
The only reductions, the only persons to be laid off for fall is me, right?
Richmond, what happens to other people does not concern you. I would rather not answer this question.
But generally, not specifically, but generally.
I would rather not answer the question.
But you normally tell people about this in February?
Normally we try to, late January, early February.
But this decision was made in February after the students started another voice. That may indicate that this wasn't just a coincidence.
Well, the first step was for you to be relieved of student publications. The second step was more of an administrative matter.
Do you intend to do away with journalism instruction?
I didn't say that. I said I have an academic committee studying not only the costs of journalism, but some other areas. Now, Richmond, I've tried to be cooperative with you on this so that you can have this on tape for your personal use. But I certainly hope that this is something between the two of us and that this will not be made public.
I think it will have to be used for whatever purpose it serves.
Well, if it has to be used for whatever purpose it serves, I don't think I can allow you to leave here with that tape.
I think you'll have to. It's my tape.
Well, you might just have to whip me to get it. Richmond! Richmond! Richmond!
Brown ran through the woods to his home behind campus. He put the tape under lock and key. His contract was not renewed. That summer, he wrote a 77-page letter to the Alabama Baptist State Convention, asking for an investigation of the controversy swirling around both newspapers, the journalism department, and his dismissal. He made 9 recommendations for remedial action. Topping the list was the removal of President Wright and several of his administrators. The state convention declined to intervene and referred the document to Samford's trustees, who investigated and returned a 27-page report to the convention. Earlier in the year, Vice President Wheeler recommended eliminating journalism as a major, proposing it become a minor under English. The trustees endorsed his recommendation. Meanwhile, President Wright weathered the controversy and served for another decade before retiring at age 70. Another Voice ceased publishing after 1 issue in the fall of 1973. But not before the Associated Collegiate Press, a national critiquing agency, honored it as a first-class college newspaper and awarded it a mark of distinction for superior writing and editing. Journalism courses were taught in the English department for 12 years, until Wright's successor, President Tom Courts, revived it as a major in 1985. Today, journalism and mass communication is the largest major in arts and sciences. It has an alumni base of some 800 graduates and recently celebrated the 25th anniversary of its revival. Meanwhile, Samford has been ranked in the top tier of its peer group by U.S. News & World Report for more than 2 decades. The school had a record enrollment of more than 4,700 students from around the world in 2011 and looks forward to continued growth.
As I look at Samford, I see an institution with a very rich history, but we all recognize that there are parts of our history that we're not as proud of. And I would like to say that at Samford we choose not to be bound by those events in the past that would cause us to be less than we can be now and in the future.
Professor Brown's future did not include Samford. He left to found the journalism program at UAB, Samford's crosstown rival from the 60s. He finished his doctorate and taught at other journalism programs before retiring in 1988. He lives in the same house in Homewood that he lived in during the controversy, the same one in which he locked away the tape.
I don't think that I can allow you to live here with that tape.
It did not see the light of day for 38 years until he donated it to Samford's library in 2011. Williams did not graduate. His scholarship was revoked while standing in line to register for his senior year.
That scholarship that I had won from Chambers County, the one that was for young men of good character, my character had been at this point found wanting in terms of scholarship support.
He was some 20 hours short of graduation. He could not afford to continue.
Not a dime of my college support ever came from my family. I had what I could get in terms of in scholarship or in work study, and that was it. And so I, at that point, had to go, I went to work full-time, for the Birmingham News as a newspaper reporter.
He later reported for and edited several state and regional magazines and newspapers. He became a board member of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and in 1981 became founding director of the center's Klan Watch Project, which counteracts hate groups. In 2000, Williams co-founded his second book publishing company, where he is editor-in-chief. He has written, edited, designed, and published some 450 books, more than any other general trade book editor and publisher in Alabama history. As he reflects on the lake bed controversy, he has only 2 regrets.
I regret that it cost Richmond Brown his job. I regret that it caused, I don't feel responsible for this, but I regret that the incident caused the journalism program to be, shoved into a side drawer for a period of time, thereby depriving other students who might have wanted to have that journalism education.
However, he is not bitter. He credits President Wright for unwittingly providing him with a unique journalism education.
He didn't perhaps intend to do it, but that Leslie Wright gave me the best journalism education that probably anybody at Samford has ever gotten. You know, it was a crash course in newspaper theory, history, law, production, you know, all of those things rolled into one compressed period there.
In 2009, the journalism department inducted him into its inaugural Wall of Fame class. In 2010, Williams re-enrolled at Samford to finish the degree he was denied 37 years earlier. Samford paid his tuition. He graduated in May 2011 at age 59.
Horace Randall Williams.
Among the members of this distinguished class today sits a graduate I am sure thought that this day might never come. Randall Williams, will you please stand for just a moment while I talk about you? His is a very long story, ladies and gentlemen, but on this day, he is a Samford graduate. Imagine the success he will now enjoy with that diploma. Randall, congratulations and Godspeed.